Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo episode. I have a topic I want to dive into. I'm really excited to chat about this one today. I think this is super important when it comes to body recomp, and we're focused on body composition. So again, real quick, just to summarize like what we're trying to do. And when we talk body recomp, we're talking, a lot of people think it is just simultaneous fat loss and muscle gain, and it certainly is. And again, that can happen under certain conditions and for certain people. To me, body recomp is also over time, we're changing our body composition, right? We're adding more muscle and we're losing body fat. And again, there may be times where we're focused a little bit more on one or the other, but again, over time, that's ultimately what we're trying to do, right? We're changing our body composition versus just focusing on scale weight, right? And so the main differences between weight loss and when we're focused on body comp are, again, the same things still apply. If we want to lose weight or we want to gain weight, again, we need to be in a calorie surplus. We need to be in a calorie deficit, right? We want to obviously do things that get you to either consume more calories, consume less calories, whatever it may be to get there. And again, those fundamental things still apply when we're focused on body recomp, but there's a lot of things that people overlook in that process that hurts their body composition. And one thing is during a fat loss phase, when we're in a deficit, right? So we're consuming less calories than we're expending. We're seeing our weight trend down over time, something that small things that people do. And one of those things are not focusing on, they just think that training performance is going to suffer. And so that leads to them not really pushing their training when at the end of the day, that one's a mindset thing, but it's also the things that we are not focusing on. Where people are overlooking certain things that, oh, hey, all you need to do is eat more, eat less, or whatever it may be, or move more, eat less, and you'll have the body composition you want. Again, that's not the case, right? There's some very important things to where we can maintain our performance and actually still, and in most cases, still increase our performance, which is going to put us in a better position to not only lose body fat, but also build muscle in that process. Okay. I think most people underestimate what they can do. Now, in saying this, at the end of the day, being in an energy deficit is going to be suboptimal for building muscle. That doesn't mean that we can't build any muscle, but you're always going to see better return on investment from a muscle building standpoint if we want to add more muscle by being at maintenance or a small surplus. Okay. So we need to take that into consideration, right? Because people will hear, oh, you can build muscle in deficit. Okay, that means you can build a ton of muscle in deficit. No, that's not the case. It's just, you can still build it. It's just not going to be as effective as it would be if we got you to maintenance or a small surplus. And again, your body composition also really does matter in this. So the body composition you currently have also matters, right? The more body fat you have, the less muscle you have. You can probably build a little bit more muscle in a deficit than someone who has less body fat and more muscle already. Okay, so that is super important there. So what I want to talk about today is how we can still push our training in a calorie deficit, because if we can do this, we will maintain and may even gain muscle, and probably will gain muscle in a fat loss diet when we're in a deficit, right? So I want to go over how to manipulate our nutrition to maintain performance and energy during fat loss, so we can push our training for the reason that I just mentioned. Again, the problem is most people focus only on losing weight and don't think about how to fuel their body to keep energy and performance high. So training suffers, and it makes maintaining and building muscle impossible. So it leads people think they can't do it in a deficit. But it's what you're doing in that process that's hurting you. So if you can still push your training, you're going to maintain, and in many cases, build muscle in a deficit. So let's talk about what these main things are. So number one is going to be, actually, I made an Instagram post on this a couple weeks ago, but obviously the size of your calorie deficit is going to be huge. Okay. The larger the deficit, the less likely this is going to be, right? So again, we do want to look at deficits. And that's why I'm a huge fan of making sure that, in a focused on body composition, we probably want to be anywhere from we're losing about 0.25 to 0.75% of body weight per week. Okay. So again, you would just take your current body weight, see what 0.75% of that is, or 0.25%. And if you're in that range, you're probably in a good spot there, right? If we start to go over that, we may get to the point where now we're not bringing in enough energy overall to where we're definitely not going to build muscle, but maintaining it is a little bit more likely if we nail these things. But the leaner you are, the less likely that's going to be. The amount of calories you're bringing in is important. But I also think that's dependent on how long you're doing that. The shorter term it is, the more you can push it, et cetera. So again, and what I mean, and vice versa, right? So the smaller the deficit is, the longer you can push it, right? The more aggressive it is, the shorter it needs to be there. So the amount of calories you're consuming overall is very important. But next we have meal timing. So eating around your workouts is key to maintaining performance. Fasting can help moderate calorie intake, but it may impact training, right? So we want to experiment with what works. So ideally we would eat within 1 to 3 hours before and after training. And we, at the very least, want to get 20 to 30 grams of protein within an hour post-workout to support muscle retention. So this is where I think Meal time, it's like, oh, it doesn't really matter, but it is important. I think over time, if you're in a deficit and you're not getting protein in around your workouts, you're probably not going to maximize the muscle growth aspect of things in a deficit. Again, even in a surplus, I would still say the same, but I think you have a little bit more wiggle room than you do when you're in a energy deficit. So again, meal timing is important. So we want to, if we're not getting in many calories as we normally do, we want to try to bias as many of those around our workout as possible, because that's going to allow you to really maintain your performance. If you're in a fat loss diet and you go into your training fasted every single day, and then you don't eat afterwards because you're not eating till 12 or 1, and you eat when you work out early in the day, you're going to be hurting your body composition in that process, at least a little bit. We want to have balanced macros, right? So during a cut, carbs and fats will naturally drop, but we want to keep them as high as possible within your calorie. And then protein, we want to make sure it's at least 1 gram per pound of body weight to support muscle retention. So I think the big thing here is we just don't, like with carbs and fats, we don't want to have them be way out of whack, right? Carbs, we have a little bit more flexibility in terms of we can go somewhat low with them, but I think the lower we go, the tougher it's going to be to maintain your performance in training. But that is very determined, like it is very dependent on the amount of calories you have, right? Someone who needs to get down to 1,400 calories, they're a small person, your carbs, unfortunately, are going to get fairly low. That's where, again, we go back to the meal timing, where we need to time those carbohydrates around our workouts to really get the most out of those there. So again, we want to have somewhat balanced ratio here of carbs, fats, and proteins. And again, making sure we at least get 1 gram per pound of body weight from a protein perspective. Micronutrients matter too. Okay. So many fat loss diets fail because people focus only on cutting calories, and this leads to hunger, fatigue, and poor recovery. So we want to prioritize nutrient-dense foods and consider a solid multivitamin to cover gaps. I think the big issue with calorie deficits is usually they're nutrient deficits, right? So yes, there's some calorie deficit. There obviously is a calorie deficit with it, but they're also nutrient deficient. So we want to make sure that we have a good, solid quality multivitamin in there, but then also we're getting in whole foods and foods that are high nutrient dense type foods. Because again, that's going to allow you to feel your best and perform your best in your training. If we're not getting those, we're going to be lacking. We're not going to feel our greatest, and therefore we're probably not going to recover as quickly. We're not going to be able to push our training as hard. So micronutrients matter. So this is where food quality, the food choices you make, are super important. Again, calories matter, but what those calories are made up of are important, right? If it's just packaged type foods, tasty foods, because you want to have chocolate or whatever it may be, again, you're probably going to be missing out on some micronutrients. So at the very least, we want to consider a multivitamin to cover the gaps. But again, we need more nutrient dense foods as well too for the satiety aspect of it. Hydration. So even mild dehydration can hurt performance. So we want to drink plenty of fluids and consider an electrolyte supplement to support training during a deficit. So we want to make sure we're staying hydrated. Again, we need to, at this point, because we're in a deficit, we are at a higher risk of not being able to perform well. And if we're also layering on top of it that we're not getting in enough hydration, fluids, you're just going to shoot yourself in the foot. So we want to make sure we stay hydrated in that process. Creatine and caffeine can help, right? So creatine is a must for muscle retention and performance. And then caffeine can enhance training, but we do want to avoid it too close to bedtime to protect sleep. So this is where we can start to use some supplements in this process, right? Creatine's a must at all times, especially in a fat loss diet. We want to make sure we stay on creatine. That's going to help with performance, but it's also going to help with muscle retention because of the performance, right? I think that's the big thing here is it helps with the performance. Therefore, it's going to help you maintain muscle. And then caffeine, same thing. You don't want to overdo the caffeine, but caffeine can help you push your training and maybe get a couple extra rep or two over time, and you don't fatigue as quickly. So you feel good during your training, so you can really push training. But again, we want to make sure we don't take it too close to bed, as now it's going to start to impact sleep, which is going to impact performance and body composition there. So next, we could use some refeed days. Okay, so having 1 to 2 days or more per week at maintenance calories, especially around training, can help sustain energy levels and performance. This is where we can use refeed days. So again, you can use an approach where, hey, maybe 5 days or 4 days out of the week, you're in a deficit. Those would be a lot larger. And then maybe 3 days out of the week on your training days, you're eating more calories to help support training. And then again, you can use everything else that we've already talked about so far to help you improve your performance. And so again, it's, hey, you're in a deficit 4 or 5 days out of the week, but then 2 days you bump up calories, and that can help you push your training, which so in turn, that's going to help you maintain muscle and even potentially build muscle in a deficit. Sleep. Nothing's going to zap your ability to push your training in a fat loss phase more than poor sleep. So we want to prioritize sleep like we do our workouts. So again, making sure that we're prioritizing that, because again, if we're doing all these things, but then we're sleeping 4 hours a night, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot, and you're not going to build muscle while you're in a energy deficit. Like I said initially, we can build muscle in a deficit, right? There's certain conditions, certain things that we need to do. But no matter what, we're definitely not in the best position to add muscle. And so again, something like this is going to be something where we're shooting ourselves in the foot, where it's, again, is it the deficit why you're not building muscle, or is it the fact that you're not getting good sleep. And again, a lot of people are so quick to blame it on, say, a deficit, but really it's things like this that add up. So those are the main things we want to focus on. If we can do these things, your training performance should still be good. And if it's still good and you're still progressing, then you're going to at very least maintain muscle, but you're likely going to build some muscle in this process. Again, it's context dependent, right? Someone who has a lot of muscle and not very much body fat, your goals, you're trying to maintain as much muscle as possible, right? And you're on the then where steps in terms of these things are going to cause you to lose muscle. Whereas you take someone who has more body fat and less muscle, again, they are already at a higher likelihood of being able to add muscle in this process. You do these things, they're going to be an even higher likelihood, but you start to misstep these things, and it's going to probably be you're going to be more on the line of just adding very little muscle or maintaining what you have, which again is fine. So really, I think long story short, you're definitely in the best position to maintain muscle when you have higher body fats and less muscle. And then vice versa, if you have a lot of muscle and less body fat, again, for you, it's just, hey, you want to try to maintain as much as possible. But again, if you really nail these things that we talked about today, you could potentially add a little bit in that process. Now, let's take somebody on the very end of the spectrum. Let's imagine Chris Bumstead. He was his size, but he also wasn't on any special sports supplements or anything like that. For him, like, he is just going to need to do whatever he can to maintain and probably just not lose, or he's either going to try to do everything he can to maintain or do whatever he can to not lose as much, right? Again, somebody way on that side of things. But the fact that he's on special sports supplements, that obviously helps maintain that. So that is a different conversation there. So the takeaway is cutting doesn't mean sacrificing performance or muscle, right? I think a lot of times that's automatically where people go, oh, I'm in a deficit, I'm going to lose muscle. No, that's not the case. If we do these things, if you implement these strategies, you'll feel stronger, you'll recover better, and you'll maintain more muscle and probably add muscle during your fat loss phase. So again, I think performance is overlooked in a deficit. And again, people are so quick to be like, hey, you're going to lose muscle, but they don't do these things. And then their performance suffers because they're not doing these things. And because their performance is suffering, now they put themselves at a higher risk of losing muscle because of that. So again, we need to look at these things here. And again, performance, when we're talking body recomp, body composition is super, super important there. So let me know if you struggle with any of these, if you have any questions on these. If you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, that will help more people find this podcast. Next, if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN_. You can ask me about this episode in particular. And then lastly, if you struggle with any of these things in a deficit, or you just struggle with hunger during a deficit, whatever it may be, then my free 30-minute strategy calls for you. We can dive into what that is, what you need to work on, and set up a game plan for you moving forward. So that's it for this episode. I'll chat with you guys next time.